Alright, now let's talk about components of Docker. Now, what you're seeing here, we'll go in detail of each of these one by one. However, just to give a quick summary, um, the top level components or some of the components are Docker Engine, Docker Desktop, Docker Hub, Compose, and Swarm mode. Now, Swarm itself is not a component but more of a mode in which you can use Docker. However, let's start with Docker Engine first. So, Docker Engine is the core engine that enables your apps to run in containers. Now, this is the engine which is actually based on Containerd. You can read more about it on containerd.io website. Uh, this engine, when you're able to run your applications in a container-based environment, it essentially solves the dependency hell problem. One example of that is when developer says, "Hey, it works on my laptop, but I don't know why it is not working on production or on say on a QA instance, for example." And it is available for various different environments. It's available for Linux, CentOS, Debian, and so on, as well as for Windows Server operating systems. Now, over here, you might see that it's not showing as available for Mac, for example, but this is the engine. This is not the desktop client. So you can actually run engine on your Mac, but internally it's using the Unix platform to run it in a Linux-like environment as opposed to running on a native Mac environment. Now let's come to Docker Desktop. So Docker Desktop is the client which allows you to interact with the engine. Now these desktop clients are available for Mac, Windows, as well as for Linux environments. In case of Linux, it's not a visual client most likely. It's mostly a command line based only environment. However, for Mac and Windows, you have a visual client as well through which you can interact with the engine. When I say interact with the engine, it basically means you can create Docker images. You can use those Docker images to create containers. You can pull images from Docker Hub. You can use Docker Compose, Docker Swarm, and etc. and so on. Docker Hub. Well, Docker Hub is really this huge library of container images. Let's actually go and have a look at one of. So I'll just go to the Docker Hub URL and I'll go to Docker Hub. So Docker Hub, if I click on explore, it will allow me to see all these official images which are built and maintained by the Docker team. So say for example, if I want MySQL image, I can search MySQL and currently it's showing me all, although the official one is right over here. I can just filter it by official. So it shows me only the MySQL official image. Now you can see there are more than 10 million pulls which have been made on MySQL's official image. Same way I can say search for Django, which is a Python based web framework. I can search for Python actually. So, so Docker Hub is nothing but a library from where you can pull the images and you can build on those images by further customizing them as per your requirements. Docker Compose, well, Docker Compose allows you to define and run multi-container Docker applications. So let's assume you have an environment where you need to, I'll actually open text edit and type in it. So let's assume you have an environment where you need to run MySQL as a container, Django as a container, Redis as a container. Now MySQL is your database, Django is your Python based web application, and Redis handles all your caching mechanism, right? Now if these three are individual requirements which must be running every time your app has to run on any environment, then you can have these three listed in a declarative way. We'll talk more about declarative when we come to Docker Compose. In a single file called Docker Compose file, and each time you run that particular Docker Compose file against the Docker engine, it will go ahead and start all these three containers for you so that your app can be accessed on a local machine or on production system every time you do it. Docker Swarm. Docker Swarm is actually a mode in which you can use Docker. By mode, I basically mean you are grouping your multiple machines which are running Docker into a cluster. Now, say for example, you have huge workloads or you want to have efficiency in terms of reliability and scalability. and you want to be able to scale your app up and down across multiple nodes and basically uh, divide them into multiple nodes operating in multiple different regions, say Europe, US, Asia, and so on, so that they are highly available at all the times. You can do this by using something called Docker Swarm. There are alternatives to this known as Kubernetes or Mesosphere and so on. In this series, we'll talk about Docker Swarm. Now, these machines, they actually can run Docker. They should be able to run Docker, and then they could use something like Swarm init and Swarm join to essentially join a cluster of machines which is already operating and operate as a Swarm node. Node is nothing but just a machine. So once you are operating in Docker Swarm mode, whenever you run Docker commands in that Swarm mode, they are actually executed on this cluster of machines, this cluster of nodes, which is running Docker clients by a Swarm manager. Now, all these words, they might sound very confusing at first. We'll come and talk about these more, and we'll try to make it as visual as possible so that you are able to get a good grasp on it. So that's it for this video. Now next we'll move on to more detail of each of these components.